Welcome to RootsTech Connect 2021. I'm Dana Palmer. This session is Connect Your Family using Find a Grave. The contents of this video, as well as the thoughts, views, and opinions expressed herein, belong solely to the creator and do not necessarily reflect the views of FamilySearch International and RootsTech. Okay, so we're going to cover just a brief introduction in using Find a Grave. We'll cover some tips for finding your person, and then I'm going to go through some very specific examples of what I did to track down a Revolutionary War family. So, tips for finding your person. When you're using the Find a Grave website, generally when I start, I will add the person's given name and their surname, and then the burial state, and then I look just to see what comes up. Often if I do that and they're in the system, they'll come right up the first time I search for them. If I get too many hits, then you can narrow it down by adding the death year in, or you can add the county to the burial location. And if I do that, again, I usually can find them. And I'll just browse them until I find the person. So this is what the Find a Grave website looks like when you go to it the first time. You can see I've entered some information here. And you can just enter your basic information. So I typed in the name John Koppel and then Adams County, Ohio. And then you'd click search. Now, if you click more search options, you do have some additional options. You can look for people under their maiden names, partial last names, similar spellings. They've added a thing here where you can put spouse, parent, child, or siblings' names. If you know the memorial ID number, you can search by that. Of course, you can search by birth year or death year and arrange, from that. Before, it used to be everything was exact, but now you can have some variation in that. And so these are things that you can search for your person. So I wanted to search for John Koppel. I know based on family information and research I did that he died and was buried in Adams County, Ohio. I wasn't 100% certain which cemetery it was. I wanted to identify the cemetery and then get a picture of his tombstone if one still existed. And so I just did the basic search in here, typed in John Koppel, and then did Adams County, Ohio, and then clicked the search button. Unfortunately, I got no matches. Now, why? Why does this happen? Well, there's several reasons why it could happen. The name could be misspelled. It could have been Copple or Koppel or variations on that. He may not have been in Adams County. I have had some that died in one county and were buried in another county. He could be under initials, especially if he's a veteran, like during the Civil War. I've seen a lot of them under initials, and their name wasn't spelled out. And another reason that he just might not be in the Find a Grave memorials. He may not have been added yet, and so if that's the case, then of course I'm not going to find him because he's not in the system. And once I've added him, then he would come up. So if you do want to search, you can refine and search. One of the tricks you can use on the main search is instead of having his full name as John, you could just have a J and nothing else, and then that will let you search for the surname Koppel with variations on the given name starting with the letter J. And sometimes I've done that and I've been successful. So what are some tips for finding your person? Well, there's lots of tricks that you can do. Some of the ones I use, I search for name variations. Think like a 6-year-old. How's a 6-year-old going to spell their name, and try variations on it? Just because you spell it one way doesn't mean that's how it's in the memorial. And I've seen some where the memorial spelling is different than what's on the tombstone. So you just have to be creative when you're searching for them, especially if they're not already connected to their family. Search by initials. Like I said, if they're veterans, they might be under the initials only. Search for nicknames. They could have nicknames in there. Search for partial names. If they're female and you don't know their married name, you can search for maiden name. Now, they won't come up unless their maiden name is entered in there, but it's always worth checking. You can also search by the surname only with the death year and then no burial location, because sometimes they're in there, but the people don't know where they're buried, and so they have the burial location as unknown. And if you search for the person and put the burial location, they won't come up. Or if you leave off the burial location and you have the other information, they do come up. So there's lots of different tricks to find your person. Now, one of the other things that you can do is check for published indexes, and these may be online or they may be in book form. A lot of the DAR groups and genealogical societies have gone through and published books about people buried in their cemeteries, and these may or may not be online, but these are excellent resources that you can use to be able to find them, because if they're in the books and they're not on the database, you can then add them to Find a Grave and then connect your family. So that's what I did. I got started, and Daniel Koppel is John's father, and I knew that he served in the Revolutionary War. And this, I found an entry on Ancestry. There's a database there called Abstracts of Graves of Revolutionary Patriots, and they had a Daniel Koppel listed, who lived in Liberty Township in Adams County, and they listed the cemetery as the Dutch Cemetery. Now, if you notice up here his last name, this database spells it C-O-P-P-L-E instead of C-O-P-P-E-L. So maybe I didn't find them because I misspelled them. But anyways, this still gives me the cemetery name. So if you have a cemetery name, you can go search for them. In addition, they also had a database called the Official Rosters of the Soldiers of the American Revolution Buried in the State of Ohio. And again, I found Daniel Koppel. And what's even better, this book had a short biographical sketch about his service and where he was buried. So at the top, it tells me Daniel Koppel served as a private in the German battalion of the Continental Troops during the Revolutionary War. And down here, it tells you he's buried in the Dutch graveyard in Liberty Township, together with his wife, and his grave is unmarked. So now that's a very good clue of why I can't find him in Find a Grave. If he doesn't have a tombstone and no one has gone and marked his grave, that's probably why he's not in there, because a lot of the stuff that's in Find a Grave is for people who have tombstone memorials. Now, not everybody, but a lot of them. And if this is a person with a very old grave that's unmarked, that's probably why he's not there. But I now have the cemetery name, and I can now go search for it. So if I go back to Find a Grave and click on cemeteries, I can then search by cemetery name. Now, sometimes I want to search just by location, just to see what cemeteries are in that county. But you can also search by the cemetery name. So I typed in Old Dutch Cemetery, and then I clicked search. Unfortunately, I got 0 locations. And I did the same search doing Dutch Cemetery, and I didn't get anything either. Again, why? Well, sometimes cemeteries have variant names. And I'll tell you, here in Ohio, in the county where I live, one of the cemeteries here, it's an old cemetery that's on private land, it had 10 different variant names. And the names were dependent upon the time period and the owner of the land. And so what the official name in is Find a Grave might be different than what it was recorded by the family or by whatever group came in and did the tombstone readings. And so you have to be aware that sometimes if you don't find them, it's because the cemetery has a variant name. So how do you find them? Well, again, that's where I would go to the DAR and the Genealogical Society. Look to see if they have printed indexes to the burials in their county. And if you do that, you're going to be very successful. So in this case, I went to WorldCat, because WorldCat's a great place to find books and to see if there's books that are published. So I did a search for Adams County, Ohio, and the cemeteries in Adams County, Ohio. And I lucked out and found the Genealogical Society there published a book about Liberty Township cemeteries. And this was great because now I could check this book to see if they were listed. Now, Adams County is about 2 to 2.5 hours from my house, so it was quite a drive, and it was more than I wanted to do in a day. And then to do research. But if I use WorldCat and you come down here below, you can type in your zip code and it will tell you that the libraries and repositories that are close to you that have this book. And so if I wanted to go for just a half an hour drive, I could go to the Southern State Community College and they have a copy of this book there, and then I could view it at that location. And so this is a great tool to see if there's books that are published, but then also to figure out where they are and to be able to go view them. Now, in this case, this is what it looked like. This is the page from the book, and I found an entry for John and Priscilla. Priscilla is John's wife, and Daniel on the couples. And if you look here, it says Daniel was in the Continental Army, German Battalion, Revolutionary War. So this, and I looked through the whole book, and this was the only thing that came close to matching. Now, again, he didn't have a tombstone, so, you know, there could have been somewhere else, but this, everything else matched for this area. So it's very likely that the Briar Ridge Cemetery is a variant name for the Old Dutch Cemetery. And so I would definitely want to talk to the Genealogical Society and confirm that, which I did. This is a variant name. And so now I know that John and Priscilla are in the same cemetery as John's father, Daniel. Now, if you notice here, Daniel's wife is not listed. She should be here, but she has no transcription because when they went through and did the tombstone readings, she had no stone. And so she was not entered here, even though she is in that other, the other sketch that tells you that she's here. So I'm going to go back and do a search by cemetery again. So click on cemeteries. And this time I'm going to type in Briar Ridge Cemetery for Adams County. And then click search. And when I do that, it comes right up. And I can click on the cemetery name, and it will take me to the page for the cemetery. Now from here, before I just add a memorial, I always want to double check to make sure that there's nobody else that's there. Now up here at the top, it will give a little bit of information about the cemetery. They'll often have a little sketch here about them. But sometimes, this is a very small cemetery, sometimes if they're large active cemeteries, they'll have phone numbers and they'll have web links. And if you go to the web links, often you can find other helpful information that might have information about the people buried there, even if they're not in Find a Grave. If not, if there's a phone number listed, I will tell you many times I will call a cemetery and say, I think my person's buried in your cemetery. Can you check your records? And they'll say, oh, sure, we'll go do that. And they'll either go look at that moment or they'll take my phone number and they'll call me back. And I have been able to identify where people are buried by doing that so many times, especially if I know their children are there. And I think the parents are there, and I'll have them check. And I've been very, very successful. So that's a trick that you can use, especially if they're not in any of the other listings. Call the cemetery or check out their website to see if there's additional information on people that are interred in that cemetery. Now, let's talk about how to search within the cemetery. One of the things I love about Find a Grave is you can do some different things depending on where you are. Now, if you're in a specific cemetery page like this one, over here in the bottom, they'll let you do searches. Now, on the main screen, you have to have a surname or a partial surname to be able to search. But that's not true when you're on the cemetery page. You can actually search by just the given name, or by initials. I have done some where I did a J for the given name and then a C for the last name. And then it showed me all the people that started with J and their surname started with C. And I was able to find them even though they were misspelled. You could also do it where it's just a given name with a death year and be able to find them. And that's especially helpful if you've got females and you don't know their married name. You know they're there, but you don't know their married name because they've married more than once. It's a great way to catch them in the cemetery when you don't know how they're listed. So definitely there's some search techniques that you can use here in the cemetery page. So I always check first before I add a new memorial. So in this case, I did just COP because I wanted to see if they were spelled differently. And I tried other variations too. And of course, I got no memorials found. So they are absolutely not in the cemetery, even though they should be. So my next step is to add them. So adding people. So if we go to the cemetery page, we're going to click on Add a Memorial. There are several ways to add people to the Find a Grave database. If you know the cemetery, it is far easier to go to the cemetery page and add the memorial there. You can go to the main Find a Grave page and add the memorial from the main page, but then you have to identify the cemetery. I just think it's easier to add them from here. Now, if you've got a person that was cremated or their body was donated to science or their burial is unknown, then you definitely want to come up here to the main Find a Grave page and click on Add a Memorial from that main page because it will let you do other variations. Especially like if they were buried at sea or things like that, they've got all those choices there that you can add. But if they're in a cemetery, it's easier to go to the cemetery and add them. So we're going to click on Add a Memorial, and then you'll get a screen that looks like this. And you're going to go at the top here and add the names in. Again, if you know the woman's name, always add the maiden name. I put that he's male, and I put his birth year approximates, and then his death information and the details. Down here you can add a biographical sketch. You do not have to, but you can if you want to. If you don't add it here, you can always come back and add it later. And when you're done, you click Add Memorial. And then your page looks like this. Now, often what I'll do is if I find them in a transcription list from the Genealogical Society, so I know they're here and they had a tombstone at one time, I'll add their memorial, and then I'll click here where it says Request Photo. Because what this does is somebody who lives near this cemetery has volunteered to go take pictures free of charge, and they'll go and they'll find the tombstone, identify it, and take a picture of it. And then you can add it to the memorial. It's a very quick and easy way to get the tombstone pictures without having to travel there yourself. It's especially helpful if your cemetery is in a different state than where you live. Now, each person is given a memorial number, so you can see that here. And if you want to link people, you need that number. So we're going to talk about linking family members. So I've already added his wife, Priscilla. You can see she's here. Here's her number. So I'm going to go back to John's page and click Edit. And then I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to add her number under Spouse. And then I'm going to click Save Changes. And when I do that, you can see she's now added down here under Family Members, and they're linked. In order to add, you always go to the person and you link the person to their spouse and to their parents. You cannot add a child to a parent's page. You have to go to that child's page. Now, remember here, there's Daniel that was listed here, so we're going to go back and add his memorial too. So we added his information, and then he has a number. And so if I want to link Daniel to his son, I have to copy Daniel's number and go back to John's page, add in Daniel's number, and then save changes. And now Daniel is linked as a father to John. And I would do the same thing for John's mother. Knowing that the wife is in the grave and is unmarked, I'm going to go ahead and add her because I know she's there. And so based on the family information, this is what I put. Now, because we don't know exactly when she died, I did add a little bit of details here in the bio section. And you can see I now have Katharina and Daniel linked to 2 of their children. Now, one of the things that I like to do using Find a Grave is once you get the family in the system, make sure you go and link all the children to the parents, because it makes it easier for researchers in the future to find the family members. And if they do that, you might be able to have people that will post pictures because they have them in their system, in their own personal files. And so I always like to have my family members connected by linking them. So let's talk about linking children to parents. So here's one of Daniel and Catherine's sons that moved to Illinois. And as you see down here, he's linked to his wife and to one of his children, but he's not linked to his parents because prior to this time, his parents had no memorial. Now that I've created their memorial, I want to go and link him to his parents. Now, if you notice up here, it says suggested edits instead of edit. That's because somebody else created this memorial, and I can suggest they make a change, but that doesn't necessarily mean they will. So the screen looks very similar, and we're going to scroll down, and you want to type in his parents' numbers, and then you do save suggestions. And if you do this, then it'll be pending. The people will review it. They'll have about a month to review this, and they can either approve it or they can reject it. If they do nothing, it'll automatically be updated. But if they do deny it, then then they won't change it. And most of the time, people are good and will change the information. Now, sometimes you want a memorial transferred to you. In this case, someone else had created a memorial for my father, and I wanted the memorial transferred to me, and so I requested it to be transferred. And they were able to. They willingly did that. Now, in my grandparents' case, the person that created the memorial did not want to transfer the memorial to me, and I had to get Find a Grave's help to have them transfer it to me, because if it's within your great-grandparents to your great-grandchild's generation, and you were a closer connection than they are, they have to transfer it to you. And if they don't, you can get Find a Grave to help you get it transferred. Now, if you control the memorial down here at the bottom of your screen, you can transfer it to someone else. You just need the person's ID number to do so. and then you can easily transfer it. Just keep in mind, once you transfer it, you cannot get it back. So you have to be careful if you're going to do that. So in this case, if I wanted Daniel David Koppel's memorial transferred to me, then I would go under suggested edits, because this is not my memorial. And then I would come down here to where it says suggest other corrections. And if I did that, it'll pop up with a little screen where I can send the person an email. Now, in this email, when you're going to send it, you need your ID number. So if you go to your profile page, which is in the upper right corner, you'll have an ID number assigned to you. And you take that ID number, and in the email, I would say, could you please transfer memorial, and then list the number to me, list your name and your number, and then state your relationship. He is my, and then whatever the relationship is. If you do that, they'll generally will transfer it to you. And you'll be able to have that transfer quickly. Now, if they, like I said, if they say no, then if you're a closer generation, contact Find a Grave, and then they'll work with you and get that figured out. Now, in conclusion, just as your summary here, be creative with your searches. You can search by surname, initials, and locality. Contribute tombstone photos if you have them, especially if they're not there already. Share what you have so that everyone can benefit. If you have obituaries, those are great things to post in there, or if you have other documents that relate to the person. Sometimes if I need something to prove they're there and there's nothing else, I will add a document in. If you know the full names and dates and locations for your people, add it in. It'll make it easier for someone to locate them in the future. And lastly, link your family members. You want to connect your family, and linking the generations together is one of the best ways to do that. This concludes this session. I'm Dana Palmer. If you have questions and you need help during the RootsTech conference, you're welcome to send me a message on the chat, or you can send me an email. My email is dana@treasuredlineage.com. I'm more than happy to help you. I wish you the best, and I thank you for joining me.